Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. The Senate will hold a review on the death of George Floyd, police use of force, and the treatment of black people in the U.S. as more states call on the National Guard to stop widespread riots. President Trump says Republicans are pulling their nominating convention from North Carolina. They're looking for a new venue that can guarantee a traditional event. Recordings reveal WHO officials complained internally about Beijing's lack of cooperation and virus data sharing, a sharp contrast to the public praise it gave the Chinese regime. And the UN is considering a complaint by a democracy group in Hong Kong. The group says protesters have been abused in custody where there were no cameras to record it. The Trump administration is barring Chinese passenger airlines from flying to the U.S. starting later this month. Trump says it's in retaliation for Beijing's ban on U.S. airlines to resume flights there. The order goes into effect on June 16th, but it could be moved up. U.S. carriers Delta and United have been pushing to restart flights to China after suspending service earlier this year because of the pandemic. But so far, China hasn't allowed it. Delta says it appreciates the White House's effort to ensure fairness. The order says the U.S. isn't trying to perpetuate the situation. Instead, its goal is to allow carriers on both sides to exercise their bilateral rights. It says if the Chinese Aviation Authority adjusts its policies, the U.S. is prepared to revisit its decision. And in other news, the Senate Judiciary Committee has set a date for hearings into the circumstances surrounding the death of George Floyd, as well as police use of force and the treatment of African Americans. Meanwhile, the National Guard is deployed to 31 states to maintain order and crack down on extremists.
Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham announced Tuesday he will hold hearings on the death of George Floyd, police use of force, and the treatment of black people in the United States.
The overwhelming issue for us is after you stop the rioting, which we will, what are you going to do about the problem that led to the protest?
National Guard soldiers and airmen have been called up in 28 states and the District of Columbia as of Tuesday in response to riots that have gripped U.S. cities, mainly after nightfall over the last week. The riots erupted out of peaceful protests, with violence, looting, and arson taking place. President Trump on Monday urged governors to deploy the National Guard in their states. 23 states had already called for assistance prior to this. The widespread nature of the riots are raising questions about whether the events are coordinated. Dozens of video clips reveal a pattern of similar tactics employed by the violent extremists, many of whom appear to be affiliated with the Antifa extremist group. Here, a man, face fully covered and dressed in black, starts chipping away at a curb, loosening stones that could be used as weapons. He is quickly tackled to the ground by young men from the crowd, several of whom are of non-white ethnic origin. They remove his tool, restrain him, and stop another onlooker from kicking him. The agitator is revealed as a gray-haired white man. He's handed over to police amid a struggle. The protesters involved are released back to the crowd and the agitator is arrested. Other members dressed fully in black with sophisticated helmets and face coverings come over and appear to intimidate police. One has fire-resistant gloves attached to his bag, suggesting he is prepared for dealing with fire. This video was taken on Sunday in Washington. Some members of the extremist Antifa group dress head to toe in black, which members call the Black Bloc. They also wear masks to hide their identities. The president said on Sunday the United States will designate Antifa as a terrorist group. And the source of the protests, Floyd's death in Minneapolis under forceful police arrest, is scheduled to be discussed on June 16th. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said the Minnesota Department of Human Rights has filed a civil rights charge against the Minneapolis police. The probe will go back 10 years to see if there were systematic discriminatory practices in the Minneapolis Police Department. The FBI also said it is investigating whether police willfully deprived Floyd of his rights.
Peaceful protesters faced off with police last night in New York City. The two groups may be in talks to reach a deal in the Bronx. Looters reportedly ransacked businesses past curfew, yet Manhattan was mostly deserted except for police presence. Our reporter Kevin Hogan was on the scene.
An eerie silence fell over Manhattan Tuesday night. The city had two overlapping lockdowns, one from the virus and the other from a curfew to quell the protests and riots over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis police custody. A group of protesters crossed the East River from Brooklyn into Manhattan. At the mouth of the bridge, the police intercepted them. A police officer at the scene said the protesters and police may be trying to come to a resolution to put an end to the protests.
Keep going.
Rioters and looters reportedly ransacked businesses primarily owned by minorities in the Bronx. The mayor said he spoke with the Bronx borough president a few nights ago. The Bronx president pointed to local kids who pitched in to clean up after the destruction.
Reaches out, he's got a couple of young people there. He says, "Hey, excuse me, which organization are you from?" And the kids say to him, "We're not from any organization, we live here."
Very few souls walked the streets in the heart of the metropolis after curfew. For the most part, the only people out were NYPD officers, riot police, and Homeland Security investigations agents. Over the last few nights, violent riots and looting ravaged Manhattan.
2 blocks down, can't see it.
But on Tuesday, lawbreakers were far and few between in the heart of the city. The police arrested some in pockets scattered here and there, most likely for looting, vandalism, and breaking curfew. Shops hired contractors to board up the windows that rioters shattered the nights prior. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
The venue for the Republican National Convention is up in the air. Republicans are officially looking for a new state to host the event.
President Donald Trump says he's looking for a new state to host this summer's Republican National Convention. Host North Carolina is refusing to guarantee an unrestricted event because of the virus. The president announced the news on Twitter Tuesday night. He said the governor and state officials refused to guarantee that we can have use of the Spectrum Arena. He also wrote Governor Cooper is still in shelter-in-place mode and not allowing us to occupy the arena as originally anticipated and promised. President Trump told Governor Cooper on Friday that he wanted a traditional convention, a full arena with no face coverings or social distancing. Cooper sent a letter to the RNC Tuesday. He said a scaled-down convention with fewer people, social distancing, and face coverings is a necessity. RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel issued a statement Tuesday saying Cooper is dragging his feet. She says they have an obligation to their delegates and nominee to find a new venue. The 4-day nominating convention is scheduled for August 24th. Republicans are expected to nominate President Trump for a second term. North Carolina's virus cases are on an upward trend. They've reported over 30,000 cumulative cases and 900 deaths. About 700 virus patients are currently hospitalized in the state. Republican governors of Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee say they are interested in hosting the convention.
A pro-democracy group in Hong Kong is filing a complaint with the UN. They say protesters have been abused in custody.
A Hong Kong pro-democracy group, Demosisto, said Tuesday it had filed complaint with the United Nations over what it described as abuse of protesters held in custody. 3 protesters said guards had beaten and slapped them in places without surveillance cameras while in detention. They were detained over charges related to pro-democracy protests. The city government and the guards' representative have not commented on the accusations. Joshua Wong, Demosisto Secretary General, called on the Japanese government as well as other world leaders to support their stance against Beijing's so-called national security law.
Especially we wish world leaders could realize that supporting Hong Kong is not about anti or pro-China or not. It's about right or wrong.
During the video news conference for journalists in Japan, pro-democracy campaigner Agnes Chow requested that Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe think twice about inviting Chinese leader Xi Jinping to visit Japan.
Be not a very appropriate timing to invite President Xi when the human rights situation and when the situation in Hong Kong is being criticized by the international community.
Police say nearly 9,000 people have been arrested and nearly 1,700 charged in Hong Kong since protests escalated last year. 2 House representatives, Brett Sherman and Ted Yoho, introduced new legislation Monday aimed at defending Hong Kong's autonomy. The bill, named the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, is the House version of a Senate bill. The House bill proposes that people violating Hong Kong's autonomy be economically sanctioned. Repeat offenders would have properties seized and be banned from entering the U.S. The State Department would also impose financial sanctions on foreign banks for doing significant transactions for those offenders. The lawmakers introduced the bill in response to an internationally criticized draft law which would allow China to arrest pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong.
Internal recordings emerged from the World Health Organization. They show WHO officials complaining about Beijing's unwillingness to share virus data, even as the head of the agency heaped public praise on the regime for its efforts.
The World Health Organization struggled to obtain critical information about the CCP virus from Beijing in the outbreak's early stages. That counters the WHO's public praise of the regime. Recordings of internal meetings show WHO officials complained in meetings that Beijing wasn't sharing data needed to assess the virus. The recordings show that by the second week of January, WHO officials were exasperated at the lack of information. But the WHO's Director General continued to praise the regime's response as doctors in China were silenced from sharing information. Even after a state-affiliated lab documented the full virus genome in early January, the Chinese regime didn't share the sequence with the WHO until 10 days later, and only after the information had already made it online without Beijing's authorization. Chinese authorities even ordered researchers to hand over or destroy needed virus samples. Meanwhile, the WHO's Director General called the regime's sharing of the virus sequence impressive and beyond words. The WHO's Chief of Emergencies said it's similar to what happened during the SARS crisis, when the WHO struggled to get the Chinese regime to reveal data. He said that it didn't happen in Congo with the Ebola outbreak or elsewhere, and that this scale of cover-up only happens when dealing with the Chinese regime.
The FDA has approved designs from NASA and FITBIT for ventilators. For NASA, it's the second ventilator design added to the list authorized by the FDA. The NASA Vital uses an internal compressor and is meant to last 3 to 4 months. Vital stands for Ventilator Intervention Technology Accessible Locally. The FitBit Flow is the result of the company's effort to design a ventilator that's inexpensive and easy to use. It's a continuous respiratory support system and includes an FDA-approved manual resuscitator as part of the design. And the U.S. is launching an investigation into whether other countries are unfairly taxing American tech companies. Several European countries are considering digital taxes on Google and Facebook's local businesses. It could mean new tariffs for America's trading partners.
The Office of U.S. Trade Representatives said on Tuesday it will investigate a number of America's trading partners. The USTR wants to review how other countries are taxing U.S. tech companies. The move could mean new tariffs. The USTR chief says the president is concerned that many trading partners are using tax schemes that are unfair to American companies. He also says it will defend American businesses and workers against any such discrimination. The Section 301 probe is the same type of investigation that Trump launched into China's technology and IP transfer practices nearly 2 years ago. The USTR said this investigation would cover digital taxes in the EU, Britain, India, and a handful of other countries. It requested meetings with these governments. The trade agency says the probe would first focus on whether U.S. companies are being taxed unfairly, and if the taxes differ from international norms. Differences may include taxing revenue instead of profit or penalizing specific tech companies for their financial successes. Several European countries are currently considering digital taxes on American companies like Facebook and Google.
Coming up on the worsening of China's human rights situation, the regime's 2-decade-long persecution of a spiritual group continues in secret. More on that when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. the Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed a bill Tuesday that toughens the U.S. response to China's brutal crackdown on ethnic minorities. It sends a clear message to China of U.S. support, hoping to push Beijing on human rights.
Over the years, there has been a real commitment to shining a bright light on human rights violations in China and to say to those who are affected by that, you are not alone.
The House and Senate passed the bipartisan bill. It would impose sanctions on Chinese officials involved in the mass surveillance and detention of Uyghurs and other ethnic groups in the western Xinjiang region.
This is a genocide. More than 1 million people are in concentration camps. Millions more are harassed every single day.
The measure now needs a signature from President Donald Trump. The president says he'll very strongly consider it. U.S.-China tensions are high over the Chinese regime's handling of the CCP virus outbreak and Beijing's plan to restrict civil liberties in Hong Kong.
An inside source reveals a notorious Chinese secret agency known for persecuting a spiritual group is still in operation, despite the regime's claims that it's not. The suppression continues just the same.
A secret Chinese police agency that played a key role in persecuting a spiritual group may no longer exist, but its crackdown of the group continues. That's according to Mingwei.org. The website publishes first-hand information about the persecution of Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It's a traditional Chinese spiritual discipline practiced by tens of millions of people. The 610 office was a Gestapo-like police agency established in 1999 to persecute Falun Gong. The office was known for illegally arresting and torturing Falun Gong practitioners. It was officially disbanded in 2018 when it was merged with a national commission. On Sunday, Mingwei published a report from an inside source. They said high-ranking official Zhao Leiji urged officials to continue persecuting Falun Gong. Zhao reportedly said the 610 office is disbanded, merged, and no longer exists independently. That's for show for the anti-China Western force, because they always argue about human rights and freedom. How can you believe that it's really disbanded? He continued, look, Falun Gong still exists. The issue is still there. It must be done quickly and must be done well. Zhao Leiji is one of the 7 members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the regime's highest decision-making body. He also heads a disciplinary body inside the Chinese Communist Party, the same commission the 610 office was merged with. Other evidence also suggests that the persecution continues. In January, Congress released a report on China's worsening human rights condition.
Falun Gong practitioners continue to face horrific conditions in detention, including violence, forced drug administration, sleep deprivation, and other forms of torture.
In April, the Epoch Times obtained internal documents also indicating the 610 office's function is being actively pursued by successor organizations.
We bring attention to it continually. We believe, frankly, must be done to stop it.
Mingwei's 2019 annual review found that 774 Falun Gong practitioners in China were sentenced because of their faith. 96 practitioners are confirmed dead as a result of the persecution. Due to the difficulty of getting information out of China, the real number is believed to be much higher.
Up next, in the UK, London theaters could be in financial danger without support. Belgium is facing the driest May since the 19th century. Find out more after the break.
Hello there. Doesn't it feel like we're moving further away from the very values that our republic was built upon? And the media in our country have just been adding fuel to the flame, which is why you need to try The Epoch Times. It's pure, honest journalism that's restoring traditional values and reports the news with no spin, no hidden agendas, and no false narratives. So if you want to know the truth about the FISA abuse that took place during the 2016 election, or how socialist and communist ideologies have been infiltrating our society, or how the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up led to this global pandemic, and so much more, then you need to try The Epoch Times. And for a limited time, you can try the paper yourself for a full month for just a single $1, and we'll send you a very special gift. A 58-page magazine that investigates the truth behind the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the virus. So go to readepoch.com, try The Epoch Times, get your free gift, and stay truly informed.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
And in news from Europe, London theaters say they're in financial danger. Belgium is facing the driest May in over 100 years. Over to NTD UK's Neil Woodrow.
Thanks, Tiffany. Welcome to NTD UK, bringing you UK and European news. I'm Neil Woodrow. An investigation shows that controversial Chinese tech giant Huawei supported research at UK universities into cutting-edge technologies that could have military uses. The Telegraph reported that 17 research papers were produced jointly with Chinese universities that specialize in defense technology. Experts say the research has both civilian and military applications. The concern is over Huawei's close ties to the Chinese regime and that Beijing would have access to sensitive technology. A Huawei spokesman told the Telegraph that Huawei does not conduct military research. The UK has been heavily criticised, particularly by Washington, for accepting Huawei to provide 35% of the nation's 5G network. However, amid concerns over Beijing's mishandling of the pandemic, the UK government is now looking to exclude Huawei entirely. Staying in the UK, official figures show the number of people dying in hospitals in England and Wales for reasons unrelated to the CCP virus has fallen to below normal levels for this time of year.
The latest figures also show COVID-19 deaths are at their lowest levels since March, bolstering the government decision to ease the lockdown. Ministers are taking a cautious approach and say they've been sticking to a clear plan throughout the pandemic response.
We're now at the stage of that plan where we can get our lives a little bit more back to normal. But look, that isn't an overnight big bang thing. It's measured, it's progressive, we do it in a safe and responsible way.
However, there's also been a rise in deaths occurring at home. Of the almost 14,000 excess deaths at home since March, fewer than 2,000 were COVID-19 related, suggesting people are avoiding going to hospital and dying from preventable causes at home.
Classes in England are back in session this week for some children, but many parents may keep their little ones at home a bit longer. Children of some non-key workers can return to school after 10 weeks away. Yet a survey of school leaders found they expect 46% of families to keep their children home, amid fears that easing is moving too quickly. For many parents, it can be difficult to decide what's best.
Well, they have been off school for a long time, and I think at some point the well-being aspect is going to overtake the risk of passing on any viruses.
The survey also found that 2/3 of schools don't feel prepared to manage student movement, particularly where children are too young to understand social distancing rules. Although some sectors are restarting as the UK eases lockdown restrictions, London's West End theatres remain closed. Industry leaders say that without support, the nation's theatres, which are world-leading, could be in danger.
The main problem is that stage shows need to fill 60 to 70% of seats just to break even, something impossible under current social distancing in the UK.
This is not scaremongering, this is a reality. You've started to see some of the regional theatres failing already.
The only show currently on stage in the world is in South Korea, where a production of The Phantom of the Opera is drawing attention. There are sanitizer stations, temperature checks and gloves. One West End company is learning how to get ready to welcome audiences back.
So at the Palladium, we made it safe so people can use it now. So we have, for example, an infrared camera on the door. So if your temperature's too high, you're not allowed in. There are self-sanitising door handles. There's a one-way system. We're giving people masks.
The Society of London Theatre says the winter period, with its traditional pantomimes, Christmas shows and musicals, is going to be vital for every theatre in the country.
To Europe, the European Commission wants to set up a permanent reserve of essential drugs and medical equipment.
Shortages of key medical supplies have dogged the EU for years and were only made worse by the pandemic. Items the EU now plans to stockpile include disinfectants, reagents for testing, protective gear and essential drugs. The EU4Health programme would also establish a reserve of healthcare staff that could be mobilised in cases of crisis.
Our first objective needs to be better prepared to react and protect our citizens should a similar cross-border threat and crisis hit us in the future.
The stockpile would use funds from a new health budget worth €9.4 billion, or about $10.5 billion. The new stockpile would complement the EU's emergency stockpile created at the onset of the pandemic.
Now to Belgium, which is facing its driest May since the 19th century, and farmers in the agricultural province of West Flanders are starting to feel desperate.
The Yser River has fallen to its lowest level in 30 years. Pumping water from the river is banned and farmers have to wait for rain. Normally I get 50 to 60 tons of corn from an acre, but as it's developing now, we'll have to be happy with only half of that, on the condition that it starts raining again. Belgian farmers are suffering triple woes this year, with the lockdown disrupting food supply chains, shuttered restaurants curbing demand, and now drought.
That's all from NTD UK for today. Back to you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Neil. And still to come, Australian vintage is feeling the effects of the bushfires that ravaged the country last year. Find out about smoke taint and how it affects wineries when we return. Australian wildfires devastated nearly 50,000 square miles across the country last year. Wine producers in the state of New South Wales are only now beginning to understand the destruction caused by bushfire smoke on this year's vintage.
Wine Australia, a government and industry-funded research and development organization, estimates over 65,000 tons of grapes were damaged by smoke from Australia's recent bushfires. Robert Coleman, a winemaker in Blackheath, New South Wales, described how his winery was affected.
To start with, it was really just almost like a mist more than anything else. But then it just got browner and browner, and we were working at the vineyard in a brown haze, just constantly sitting on the vineyard. And that lasted for, well, I guess for at least 4 to 6 weeks.
According to Angus Barnes, executive officer at the NSW Wine Industry Association, the scale and scope of the smoke was unlike anything experienced by Australia's wine producers.
Historically, you've tended to have fires in a region in Victoria or Tasmania that lasted for 2-3 days, maybe a week at most.
Unfortunately, the grape smoke exposure caused what's called smoke taint. Smoke taint occurs when compounds found in smoke produced from burning wood are absorbed by the skin of grapes. It's not until the grapes are put through the fermentation process that the compounds release a smoky flavor.
If you have bad smoke taint, it's like picking up a dirty ashtray at a pub and licking the ashtray. It's just acrid and revolting.
So this is a small batch of, or the remainders of a small batch of Pinot Noir that we made back in February.
Winemakers like Beauregard Trell of Borrowdale Vineyard say Australia is used to bushfires, droughts and flood.
You always think to soldiers, which soldier on, I think it's just farmers or people growing things all over the world. They know you've got to cop it on the chin and keep smiling.
Wine Australia claims the loss due to smoke damage only represents 4% of Australia's national harvest, adding that it shouldn't impact the country's international export numbers.
And that's the latest updates for now. Thanks for tuning in. Catch up again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Tiffany Meyer.